At 0614 local time, the surface search radar aboard USS George Washington refreshes. 8 returns bloom across the scope at once. Steel hums underfoot as the carrier holds course. The sea is flat, visibility unlimited. No alarms, no music. Just the quiet rhythm of a ship doing exactly what it was built to do. On the bridge, the watch officer leans in. Bearings scroll. Speeds populate. The contacts aren't drifting. They're aligning. Combat Information Center confirms. Multiple surface contacts. Formation tightening. Range decreasing. No one raises a voice. No one needs to. At 06116, the contacts accelerate. Not together. Deliberately staggered. 2 surge ahead. 4 widen, then slide inward. 2 trail, matching speed. A fan begins to close. Closest point of approach updates again. Then again. The carrier does not turn. A deck camera pans. Long lenses lock on gray hulls cutting white wakes. Profiles sharpen. Low silhouettes. Compact superstructures. Naval paint, fresh enough to catch the sun. Bridge to bridge hails go out. English first, then Spanish. No reply. The radar plot redraws. The geometry is unmistakable now. This is not shadowing. This is blocking. At 0619, CIC tags the lead pair. Track Sierra 1, Sierra 2. Relative motion vectors point straight across the carrier's bow. Log everything, the captain says. Calm, even. Maintain course and speed. The order moves through the ship like a current. Helm steady. Engines unchanged. Cameras record. Every bearing change is time-stamped. Every knot logged. Aviation control clears the deck. Not to launch, yet, but to prepare. Rotor blades are folded. Tie-downs checked. Quiet readiness. Another radar refresh. The outer 4 contacts tighten their arc. The inner pair drift closer, narrowing the lane ahead of the carrier. Wakes overlap now, crossing in sharp angles just forward of the bow. CPA drops under 5 nautical miles. At 0621, electronic support measures register emissions. Low power, surface search. Not fire control, but not passive either. Painting us, the EW officer says. No reaction on the bridge. The carrier keeps her line. The 5-inch mount on an escort rotates a few degrees. Not enough to threaten, enough to be seen. A mechanical whisper carries across the water. The Venezuelan hulls answer by tightening again. Visual ID confirms markings. Venezuelan Navy. 8 ships. Mixed classes. Lightly armed. Fast enough. The geometry compresses. 2 bows angle in from port. 1 from starboard. The rest hold the wall. At 0623, CPA ticks down to 3 miles. Time to CPA, minutes. A camera feed shows deck crews on one of the approaching ships, moving toward the forward gun. Helmets on, no weapon manned yet. The bridge remains quiet. Helicopter crew, stand by, the captain says. Not an order to launch, an order to be ready. The sea stays calm. That's what makes it worse. At 0625, the lead Venezuelan ship increases speed again. Exhaust darkens. The wake lengthens. Its bow cuts hard toward the carrier's projected track. Intent is aggressive, CIC reports. No embellishment, just fact. Another hail goes unanswered. The carrier's bow slices on, immovable. 40,000 tons of steel refusing to blink. CPA recalculates. Under 2 miles. For a moment, the formation holds its breath. 8 hulls, 1 lane, no margin. Then the log records a detail that will matter later. At 0626, the Venezuelan ships stop accelerating. It's subtle at first. A knot here, 2 knots there, wakes shorten. Angles soften. Not a retreat. Not yet. But the wall loosens. The captain watches the plot, says nothing. The carrier continues forward, steady as a metronome. 8 Venezuelan warships remain ahead. Still close. Still blocking. Just less tightly than before. The moment hasn't passed. It has only shifted. At 0628 local time, the geometry changes again. The Venezuelan formation does not pull away. It reorders. 2 ships slide outward, widening their separation. 4 hold center mass. The remaining pair drift aft, pacing the carrier's speed with unnerving precision. It's no longer a wall. It's a funnel. On the bridge of USS George Washington, the track display redraws. Vector arrows shorten. Relative bearings tighten. New intercept solution, CIC reports. Multiple blocking axes. No one asks what that means. Everyone knows. The carrier keeps her heading. 20+ knots of disciplined inertia. Every decision is recorded. Every option weighed against rules written long before this morning. At 0630, the inner 4 Venezuelan hulls execute a coordinated move. 2 angle across the projected track. 1 eases starboard. 1 holds dead ahead. Their wakes intersect, forming a white lattice on blue water. It's deliberate, calculated, designed to force a choice. The carrier makes none. Another hail goes out. Same result. Silence. The optics team zooms in, hull numbers visible now, deck fittings, crew silhouettes moving with purpose, binoculars raised on their bridges, no weapons trained, no flags hoisted, just steel and intent. At 0632, CPA drops again, under 3 miles. Time to CPA, less than 4 minutes. The outer pair of Venezuelan ships increase speed, then match. They're not charging. They're shepherding, nudging the geometry inward from both sides. Recording all emissions, EW reports. Low-level radar sweeps continue. Still not fire control. Still enough to log. The escort's gun mount makes another subtle adjustment. A fraction of a turn. A reminder, not a threat. The Venezuelan ships answer by tightening their arc once more. On the flight deck, a helicopter crew climbs aboard. Rotors still. Power off. Helmets on. This is preparation, not provocation. At 0634, the lead Venezuelan ship cuts slightly across the carrier's bow. Not enough to collide. Enough to erase open water ahead. White water explodes from its stern as it corrects, holding position just forward of the carrier's projected path. The message is clear. The lane is closing. CA now 2.2, CIC says. No drama, just numbers. The captain watches the plot. He doesn't look at the sea. The sea doesn't matter. The math does. Another Venezuelan ship mirrors the move from the opposite side. The gap ahead of the carrier narrows to a corridor measured in ship lengths, not miles. The carrier does not slow. At 0636, the trailing pair of Venezuelan ships drift closer, reducing lateral spacing. They're building depth behind the block, ensuring there's no clean path through. 8 hulls, 1 moving reference point. The carrier. Bridge-to-bridge hails go out again. English, Spanish, calm, professional. no response. The wake patterns ahead grow chaotic, crossed, overlapping, aggressive. The water tells the story, even if the radios don't. Intent remains blocking, CIC reports. Formation disciplined. At 0637, something changes. One Venezuelan ship hesitates, just a heartbeat. Its speed dips by a knot. Barely visible, unless you're watching the numbers. The others don't follow. The formation holds, but the symmetry is imperfect now. A seam appears, faint and fleeting. The carrier presses on. At 0638, the seam widens, then tightens again as another Venezuelan ship slides to cover it. A correction. Fast. Almost reflexive. They're testing, measuring reactions, waiting for the carrier to blink. She doesn't. The deck camera shows the bow cutting through reflected sunlight, unwavering. No course change, no speed change. 40-plus years of doctrine embodied in forward motion. CPA ticks down to 2 miles. Time stretches. The distance closes. 8 ships continue to shape the water ahead. Their wakes carving lines meant to intimidate, to corral, to control. The carrier answers with silence and motion. At 0640, the helicopter crew receives the call they expected. Stand by to launch. Not yet, but soon. The moment is approaching. The line is thinning. The math is unforgiving. And ahead, 8 Venezuelan warships hold their positions, still blocking, still pressing, still daring the next move. At 0642 local time, the numbers harden. CPA drops under 2 nautical miles. In the Combat Information Center aboard USS George Washington, the plot stabilizes into something unmistakable. 8 surface contacts, all inside maneuvering distance, all moving with intent. Time to CPA, 3 minutes, CIC reports. No one repeats it. On the bridge, the captain studies the track history. Not the present picture, the pattern. Course changes. Speed modulation. The way the Venezuelan ships are shaping the water, not just occupying it. This is the line, he says. Quiet. Final. The order moves instantly. Helicopter. Launch. On the flight deck, chocks are pulled. Tie-downs release. The rotor begins to turn, slow at first, then faster, the thump building into a steady beat that carries across the water. The helicopter lifts clean, nose low, staying beneath the horizon line as it accelerates. No show, no flourish, just presence. At 0644, it clears the bow and drops to a few hundred feet above the surface, angling toward the tightest point in the Venezuelan formation. Cameras switch feeds. The helicopter's optics lock on. High-resolution imagery streams back in real time. Hull numbers, deck crews, bridge windows. The Venezuelan ships do not break formation. One of the inner vessels increases speed again, pushing forward into the narrowing corridor ahead of the carrier. Its wake spreads wide, aggressive, aimed directly across the carrier's projected path. CPA recalculates, 1.6 nautical miles. The helicopter closes. At 0645, a green laser flashes on. Not a weapon, not a threat. A marker. The beam paints the Venezuelan ship's bridge windows, steady and unmistakable. It tracks smoothly as the helicopter holds position off the bow, offset just enough to remain safe, close enough to be undeniable. A radio call follows. Calm, precise. Venezuelan naval vessel, this is United States Navy aircraft. Your maneuvering is unsafe. You are operating in international waters. Alter course immediately. The message repeats in Spanish. For the first time, there is movement on the Venezuelan bridge that has nothing to do with navigation. Figures lean forward. Hands lift binoculars. One crewman raises an arm, gesturing sharply toward the carrier. But the ship does not turn. At 0646, the helicopter widens its orbit, keeping the laser steady, the cameras rolling. Every second is recorded. Time-stamped. Geolocated. Back in CIC, the electronic warfare officer calls it out. Radar emissions increasing. Still service search, no fire control. It's a thin margin. Everyone knows it. The escort's gun mount rotates again. A few more degrees this time, still unfired, still silent. The movement is slow, deliberate, impossible to misinterpret. The Venezuelan response is immediate, but not escalatory. Speed drops, 1 knot, then another. The lead ship's bow begins to drift off the carrier's line, just a fraction. The wake shortens. The white water softens. Contact Sierra 1, reducing speed, CIC reports. The helicopter adjusts, sliding laterally to keep position. The laser remains on target. At 0647, a second Venezuelan ship mirrors the move, easing back just enough to widen the corridor ahead of the carrier by a ship length. Not a withdrawal, a recalculation. The remaining ships hesitate. Their wakes lose symmetry. The formation flexes, no longer perfectly locked. The helicopter circles once more, slow and controlled, ensuring every angle is documented. The message is already delivered. No need to repeat it. At 0648, a Venezuelan radio crackles to life. United States naval vessel, we are conducting patrol operations near our waters. It's not an apology. It's not a challenge. It's acknowledgement. The captain listens, says nothing. The reply is short, professional. This is United States Navy warship conducting lawful transit in international waters. Your movements are being recorded. Silence follows, but the sea tells the rest of the story. At 0649, the Venezuelan lead ship turns 2 degrees off axis, barely visible to the eye, obvious on the plot. The corridor ahead of the carrier opens another fraction. CPA begins to widen. CPA increasing, CIC reports. The helicopter climbs slightly, maintaining overwatch. The laser clicks off. Cameras stay on. The carrier never changed course, never slowed. 8 Venezuelan warships remain ahead, but the line has bent. And once it bends, it rarely holds. At 0651 local time, the picture settles. On the plot aboard USS George Washington, vectors lengthen, bearings relax. The Venezuelan formation is still present, still close, but no longer compressing. CPA widening, CIC confirms. Trend sustained. No cheers, no commentary, just acknowledgement. The helicopter holds a steady orbit off the carrier's bow, offset to starboard, altitude constant. Its sensors continue to stream. Hull numbers, deck posture, wake geometry. Every data point tagged and stored. The green laser remains off. It's done its job. At 0653, the Venezuelan ships transition into parallel courses. 2 fall slightly aft. The inner pair slide outward by a ship length. The wall becomes a line, still assertive, but no longer obstructive. Bridge-to-bridge radios stay quiet. The carrier maintains course and speed. On deck, the rotor wash fades as the helicopter shifts to a wider arc, signaling a move from pressure to observation. Cameras never blink. Recording continues. Emissions down, EW reports. Service search sweeps drop in frequency. No new signatures. No escalation. The escort's gun mount eases back a fraction. Not to neutral. Just enough to mirror the change ahead. Everything remains visible. Nothing is hidden. At 0656, the Venezuelan ships make their first coordinated adjustment since the standoff peaked. It's subtle, but uniform. A synchronized reduction of speed by 1 to 2 knots across the formation. It's not a retreat. It's a reset. The carrier passes the former choke point without deviation. The sea ahead opens into clean blue. Wakes straighten. Cross currents dissipate. CIC updates the log. Time, distance, bearings, recorded. The helicopter drifts slightly higher, broadening its field of view. From this angle, the Venezuelan ships are seen clearly pacing, not blocking. Their intent has shifted from control to presence. At 0659, the radio remains silent, and that matters. In these encounters, silence after contact is often louder than any hail. The captain studies the trend line, not the snapshot. He nods once. "Continued transit," he says. No qualifiers. The carrier's bow cuts on, unhurried. 40,000 tons of momentum answering pressure with procedure. At 0702, the Venezuelan formation begins to stretch longitudinally. Spacing increases. The trailing pair fall farther astern. The forward ships drift off the carrier's axis by another degree. CPA now measures in widening miles, not shrinking cables. The helicopter maintains overwatch for another cycle, then slides aft along the carrier's starboard side, keeping all contacts within sensor range. This is documentation, not dominance. Nothing new, CIC reports. Pattern stable. On the bridge, no one watches the horizon. They watch the numbers. The numbers say the same thing. Refresh after refresh. The situation is cooling. At 0076, a final radio transmission arrives from the Venezuelan side. Neutral tone. Formal. United States naval vessel, Venezuelan ships are conducting routine operations. It's a line for the record. The reply is immediate and brief. Roger, we are continuing lawful transit. No more is needed. By 0708, the Venezuelan ships have settled into parallel tracks at safe distance. Still visible, still present. No longer shaping the carrier's path. The helicopter peels away to a holding pattern. Cameras still active. Sensors still listening. It will remain until the separation holds across multiple updates. The carrier never changed course, never altered speed, never raised a voice. What remains is data. Every bearing change, every speed fluctuation, every emission, every second, logged, time-stamped, stored. As the distance grows, the sea returns to symmetry. Clean wakes, open water, predictable math. The encounter hasn't ended with spectacle. It ends with a file. And in this kind of confrontation, that is exactly the point. By 0712 local time, the distance is no longer shrinking. On the tactical plot aboard USS George Washington, the tracks tell a simple story. 8 Venezuelan surface contacts remain present, but their vectors no longer intersect the carrier's projected path. Parallel courses, safe separation, stable trends. CPA holding, CIC reports. Situation normalized. No one celebrates. Normal is the goal. The helicopter maintains a wide orbit. Sensors still hot, eyes still open. Cameras continue to record until the separation holds across multiple refresh cycles. Documentation does not end when tension fades. It ends when patterns confirm. On the bridge, the captain reviews the log. Not just the final positions, but the sequence, the acceleration points, the moments of hesitation, the instant the geometry bent instead of broke. This is where outcomes are decided. After the pressure, before the narrative. Nothing fired because nothing needed to. The carrier never altered course, never altered speed. That matters. In maritime encounters, deviation can be interpreted as concession, panic, or invitation. Holding the line removes ambiguity. The Venezuelan ships tested the space ahead. They shaped water. They compressed angles. They waited for a reaction. They didn't get one. What they did get was presence, measured, visible, recorded. A helicopter low and steady, a laser that marked without threatening, a gun mount that moved just enough to be understood, radios that stayed professional, silence where silence carried weight. This is not restraint as weakness. It is restraint as control. At 07:16, the helicopter returns to the deck. Rotors wind down. Sensors power off only after the final data packet is confirmed received and stored. The aircraft crew debriefs immediately, feeding timestamps and observations into the record. Every detail matters, not for headlines, but for consistency. The Venezuelan ships continue on their parallel tracks, now widening the gap by the mile. Their wakes stretch clean and straight. No further course corrections, no further emissions of note. The carrier continues her transit as planned. No escort breaks formation. No new orders are issued. At 07:20, CIC closes the event log. Not because the ships are gone, but because the behavior is set. This is how these encounters end when discipline holds. There are no warning shots because warning shots introduce risk, ricochet, misinterpretation, escalation paths that cannot be recalled. The absence of fire is not passivity. It is decision. The data collected during the encounter, radar sweeps, speed changes, formation shifts, radio silence, now carries the weight. It is objective. It does not argue. It simply exists. In modern naval operations, that record is power. It informs future encounters. It defines patterns. It establishes credibility without a single round expended. By 07:25, the Venezuelan ships are no longer the dominant feature on the plot. They are contacts among many. Present, not pressing. The sea returns to routine. The carrier's bow cuts forward. The horizon remains unchanged. 40,000 tons of steel moving through international waters exactly as authorized. No declarations, no claims of victory, just transit. This is the part most people miss. The goal is not to win a moment. It is to prevent the next one from becoming worse. Shots were not fired because firing would have answered pressure with noise instead of certainty. Because certainty came from math, geometry, and time. Because control held. As the distance continues to open, the final entry is made. Encounter concluded. Transit uninterrupted. No escalation. And somewhere behind the carrier's wake, 8 Venezuelan warships continue their patrol, aware now of where the line sits and what happens when it is tested. So the question remains, long after the radar screens have cleared, in a moment like this, when steel closes on steel and the margin is measured in minutes, Is holding course the stronger move? Or is it simply the only one that works?